Hi everyone, a very good morning, assalamualaikum, and a warm welcome to Cyberview's third live panel discussion for 2021. My name is Nadia from Cyberview Sindiran Berhad, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before we start, now I would like to share a little bit about what today's Tech Talk session is about. You can see that the title is The New Reality of an Endemic. Unlocking post-crisis growth through innovations. We've been hearing a lot about the pandemic, so let's start a conversation on an impending endemic. Now, we know that COVID-19 has overturned nearly every aspect of life, from the way people live and work to how companies operate due to the shift in consumer behaviors. Market landscapes have altered, new opportunities have emerged, and the race is on to capture these opportunities. And more recently, leading health experts and even the WHO have shared their views on the likelihood of COVID-19 becoming an endemic. The virus is here to stay. Now, we don't need to look far. Even our neighboring country, Singapore, is already starting to reopen its economy with this basic notion in mind that we must learn how to live with the virus. So, what does this reality mean to businesses and the society? Innovation. Unlocking post-crisis growth requires us to place innovation at the top. Businesses need to start strategizing with innovation as a key consideration, especially research, rapid prototyping, and commercialization to navigate and remain resilient in this possibly impending reality. Now let's get to know our panel. First, we have Aizat Rahim, Business Director at Finnext Capital, Sindiran Berhad. Finnext is an investment and advisory house that focuses on technology companies to scale based in Malaysia. Aizat is also the Director for Worldline Group, which comprises of a few companies that cater to wholesaling and distribution and retail businesses in Malaysia. Prior to Finnext, he was one of the founding partners for Job for Locum and a founding partner of Infinite Ventures. With experience covering across supply chain, SME, and tech investments, Aizat is a strong advocate of entrepreneurship by investing in a few tech companies as an angel investor. Good to see you again, Aizat. Our second panelist is Ammar Zolkipli, who is partner at Itxotic, Sindiran Berhad. Itxotic is a local tech company that offers digital transformation consultancy services and technology solutions development for smart manufacturing and other key industries. They are also a graduate of the Cyberview Living Lab Accelerator, or CLLA, not too long ago, last year in 2020. Ammar is a digital technology expert with a strong track record in leading and winning complex IT projects from Fortune 500 companies. He has 20 plus years of experience in engaging customers in global and regional organizations in various technical and leadership roles, from service delivery to solutions design and technical sales. In the last 10 years, he has been dealing with global business activities for customers headquartered in USA, Japan, UK, India, Netherlands, Hong Kong, Norway, and ASEAN. And thirdly, we have Shafinaz Salim, Head of Technology Hub Development Division from Cyberview. She brings vast experience in the digital arena, having previously served as a strategy and planning manager with Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, MDEC, who is also Cyberview's strategic partner. Today, Shafinaz is responsible for strategizing, designing, developing, and executing key enablers to elevate Cyberjaya into a global tech hub. In the current role, she has been instrumental in driving the development of Cyberjaya. Welcome to all our speakers. Now, before we go ahead with the questions, I'd like to remind everyone that we will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar as usual. So feel free throughout the session to share your thoughts, your ideas, or if you have any questions, you can key them right away in the Q&A function that we have below, and we will address them later. But before we go for the first question, we do have a poll. We just want to know a little bit from our audience members here. The question will appear on your screen soon, right about now. The question is, in your opinion, are we still in a pandemic, or is the situation already endemic? Okay, we may have differing views. Some experts say we have to treat the situation as an endemic already. Some people say still a pandemic with the threat of the virus still looming high. Let's see the results. I think we have a winner, but it's a close call. Okay, a little bit more of us here today this morning. Consider what we are in now to be, okay, it has shifted to an endemic. most of you concur that actually we are in an endemic instead of a pandemic. We're past the phase of a pandemic. That's very interesting. It's a very close one to tell. All right, thank you for your feedback. So without further ado, I want to throw the first question to Aizat Rahim of Finnext. Now, Aizat, we've seen already how the pandemic accelerated digital transformation among businesses. For Malaysia, this has been for more than a year, since last March, since the first MCO. So businesses had to shift their strategies, many had to diversify. And now, as we can see, even from the poll from our audience members that we have on Zoom, the world is starting to accept the reality of an endemic COVID-19. So, are businesses ready? Or rather, are they even anticipating having to operate businesses with an endemic COVID-19? Aizat.
Yeah, I think definitely they are ready to operate their businesses. I mean, come on, the whole pandemic has already been ongoing for close to 2 years now, and a year and a half. And even after we speak to a lot of businesses, whether all the way from the local mom-and-pop store to even the really big conglomerates, the multinational companies, most of them are already really used to working with this current environment. Yeah, I would say that most of them are already anticipate a lot of their businesses to find a way to move forward, right? I think a lot of times the businesses operations or how they actually run their business back then obviously have changed. A lot of their strategies has really been different. Some of them started to look into more cost-cutting approach. Some of them actually go more on a more aggressive approach, right? We've seen some of the companies actually done something like that. So I think it's more of really looking back into the fundamental of everyone's businesses and trying to find ways for them to really package all of their businesses or their solutions or product to make sure that they can actually cover the whole this whole endemic or even pandemic situation. For example, if let's say you're one of the local F&B store, I'm pretty sure you already implemented a lot of the SOPs in place, whether people want to walk in, dine in. I'm pretty sure that you should also have already looked into ways to partner up with all these other omni-channels, whether they're selling on GrabFood, Foodpanda, and many others, right? But I think most businesses nowadays, that the one that we speak to, easily about 60 to 70% of them have already considered on finding ways to move forward. And when I said move forward, means maybe perhaps it's time for them to even have their own online store. Maybe previously, those are considered as a heavy investment. A lot of times their staff are not trained. Their team members are not trained for them to do something like that. But with the current pandemic, I think it's almost safe to say that it's no longer just an additional benefit, but more of it's a compulsory for every business in order for them to stay afloat and continue to grow. And that's my honest thought. Yeah.
Let's see, I want to give an example in the legal fraternity. Law firms, if previously they were not able to operate from co-working spaces, they were not allowed to share an entrance with other business entities. But now with the pandemic and people working remotely, lawyers are working remotely, they're even having court cases online on Zoom. They've been allowed to operate from co-working spaces. So they'll be sharing the entrance of the office, the physical entrance with other business entities. So this is, I think, one example we can see how different industries are shifting. And I think, to me, in my opinion, that the legal industry is one of the less tech savvy, the less digitally inclined. So Aizat, just very quickly, I also want to ask you, it might be a little bit easier for businesses who are already very innovation-based, technology-based, digitally based to adapt. But what about those who are more traditional in their operations? What's your observation there?
Yeah, so I think most of the traditional businesses, like you mentioned, like a legal, like a lawyer and stuff, right? Not just that, I think there are also a couple of other industries as well, like even when we look at manufacturing and the rest. So they are starting to pick things up. I think there are certain industries like a legal aspect or even like the government agencies, right? It's a lot more strict. There are a lot more compliance and regulations they need to actually adhere and follow through. I think for those businesses that do not have that much constraint or regulation, I think they can really just look into their business, and we start to notice that a lot of those businesses are already adopting the adopting in this endemic era. But more of when you talk about all those traditional businesses that like legal firms or consulting firms or even government agencies, I think it's more of the the ministry or also the policy is actually something that people really need to look at. I think back then, legal industries, they are not allowed to share their co-working at their offices simply because of the legal documents that they're holding. Those are extremely PNC, right? But I think it's now more of a really for them to really adopt and find ways to digitize their document as well. If I'm not mistaken, nowadays those documents that are digitally are still not able to be used on court case. I think they still need to actually use it and cite it based on the books in the files of the library, right? But I believe that eventually that will change and people will start be able to really look through all those files and um, they will be able to adapt to this. It will take some time, but the shift is really obviously starting to go already.
I thought you mentioned manufacturing. Yeah. So I want to go down to Ammar because Itxotic, Ammar, I know that you provide solutions a lot from those in the manufacturing and agricultural sectors. So how important is digitalization in these two industries, especially now? And how receptive, you have clients in these sectors, how receptive have they been towards the solutions that you offer?
Yeah. So we built solutions for manufacturing around things like defect detection and part counting. So it's part of the their value chain, or sorry, the conveyor belt system. So for them, actually, the biggest challenge right now is actually policy. They have to comply to SOPs. It's not about automation. It's actually being able to get people to go to the factories for manufacturing. And it's almost the same with agriculture, where they are very manpower heavy. We as a nation are not very good at automation at this point. People keep saying we are still industry 2. We're not even industry 4. So that's still quite true. So to transition from 2 to 4, it's still going to take a long time. So what happened is that we kind of pivot. As a company, as a tech company, we have to look at the market, see the changes, see where the needs are at, and then we pivot as necessary. So in the digitalization of manufacturing and agriculture, it's not me selling a solution for automation of their lines, or we have like a system to do tree counting for agriculture with drones. That's not where they want to be. They want to get something that can help them to comply. That means they want to make sure that all their employees, workers are wearing masks all the time, or PPEs, that they're not, going against regulations by having social distancing. So where we see very big interest is to monitor the workers so that they can actually have the 60% capacity for the industry and not go overboard, and also to look at PPEs. Specifically because what I've heard from one of the owners is that as a business owner, they don't want to go against break the law. But the problem is that operations is not managed by them directly. It's managed by their leadership team. And the leadership team actually will try as best as possible to bend the rules. So they're going to try and push 65% occupancy, or yeah, you can wear your SOPs only in these areas, which might not actually fit with the regulations. So what they want to do is maybe have an automated system that checks for these things so that they don't have to rely on the management who might want to cheat, just because for the sake of meeting quota or hitting the numbers. So we did get some interest there. We're now in the process of transitioning and also finding new opportunities through partners like security companies. So this is funny. We don't go straight to manufacturing. We go to security companies that offer security guard services and CCTV monitoring, and they want to enhance their service to monitor for SOP and regulations.
It's very interesting. I think the challenge in these sectors is not the fact that they are not receptive towards embracing innovation and technology, but it's also just how they are structured, how they can adhere to the SOPs and at the same time compliance. Mostly that's a big thing. Thanks, Ammar. Now I want to go to Shafinaz, back to what Cyberview does in Cyberjaya. Now, if you haven't heard of the Cyberjaya master plan, do listen close. Now, Shafinaz, the new master plan for Cyberjaya emphasizes on capacity building in R&D and C, and most importantly, the development of very important 3 technology clusters, which are smart mobility, smart healthcare, and digital creative. Now we're talking about Malaysia's digital economy. So how important are these areas? Let's go and focus into these 3 areas. How important are they in this new reality?
I think it's pretty much also in echoing what both Aizat and Ammar mentioned earlier. When talking about now companies or businesses out there starting to even like pivot, right? So certainly that, you know, there is a change of the market demands in the current situation, and businesses started to rethink, right, in terms of their new offerings. Look at the R&D or innovation strategies to make sure that there's not just looking at in terms of better efficiency or productivity. Most importantly to these businesses, about sustainability, about being resilient out there. The smarter approach need to be looked at. Will certainly, you know, for especially for technology companies, will open up new markets for them. It's just like how Itxotic is looking at, you know, rather than just manufacturing, now you're looking at security areas. But for us in Cyberjaya, we look at the 3 technology clusters: the smart mobility, the smart healthcare, and digital creative. These are actually also where we're seeing the not just based on the current strength of the Cyberjaya ecosystem, as well where we are foresighting where the future is going to be look like through these R&D and technologies. Take it for example, we are looking at these 3 tech clusters in the south part of Cyberjaya, where we try to cordon a certain area to start with this new strategy. Smart mobility cluster, for example, will be able to make it ready for, even this is the time for us to really understand where the industry is looking at to be able to scale in a quick time. For example, like for smart mobility, when we have companies now like Aerodyne is very well known for its drone tech solutions, and they're big now. They're number 2 in the world. We have even in another space of drone, which is like Polar Drone, providing the training related of drone for particularly in the precision agriculture, and even Emovate as part of the mobility that's looking into the autonomous vehicle. For us, Cyberview, where we come in, where in understanding the requirements of this R&D is actually to facilitate the physical requirements. In this case, in relating to the R&D. So right from the R&D, they need to be out in the market. So the commercialization to happen, we need to test it out. So whereas that behind it, there's also where are they heading to tap onto the market. The market is not just about the R&D tech itself, it's actually tackling the industries bigger out there, whether it's going to be used for oil and gas, for surveillance, for even real estate property in the solutions that they are innovating, right? So we, even today, when we speak to our potential clients, not aside from looking at our existing clients that we have in Cyberjaya currently, we can see that there is a continuous R&D or innovation that they are keep on thinking about it as of today. And from there, we are preparing ourselves. Hey, they have this specific requirement. They need this kind of facilities to be ready for them. Even maybe it's not now, but they are doing it in phases. So for Cyberview, Cyberjaya is definitely an opportunity to make sure that we are ready for the innovation from time to time, because things are very agile right now. And even if I were to talk about the smart healthcare, more importantly right now, healthcare is, everyone is talking about it. We can see an example from our Cyberview Living Lab Accelerator program. One of the alumni, a MedCard, for example, they're known before this as a medical benefits solution companies, but they are now looking into their latest product. They just market it out, which is on the COVID-19 self-test kit, where everyone can have access to that. So they are innovating in terms of their products, in terms of their services, and these are part of the, for us, with the 3 technology clusters, the new revitalizing Cyberview master plan, we want to be ready for the likes of continuous R&D and innovation coming from the tech sectors, and also looking at where the bigger industries out there will benefit from these solutions.
Thanks, Shah. I think it's clear that from our 3 panelists, innovation is key, and innovation is very vital right now. So I want to throw a question to our audience members to find out what they think about innovation. This is our second question for the poll. It'll be flashing on your screen soon. The question is very simple. We want to know whether you think innovation is important for businesses to navigate the endemic. Okay. Straight up, 100% says yes. That's very good to know. That echoes also with what our panelists have said as well. All right, now let's move on to the next question. Aizat, let's now delve deeper and talk about the tech and innovation trends that businesses will need to consider in navigating through this potential reality. What will business continuity plans look like during an endemic? What can companies do differently when strategizing for the next 3 to 5 years? We've touched a little bit on this, how, for instance, Shah has mentioned about MedCut diversifying their portfolio. They recently came up with a self-testing kit for COVID-19, something that maybe they would never have thought of coming up with when the company was formed. So what kind of trends, innovation trends that these businesses should consider?
Okay. I think before I go into the trend of the businesses, right, I think in regards to the business continuity plan, I believe most businesses these days are already exercising a couple of measurements. And I think the first one is something I mentioned earlier, which is the cost-cutting measurement. I think that's something that is a lot of businesses are looking towards it, looking into some of the operational aspect of their business that might not make sense anymore. I think second ways is that a lot of businesses also, one thing that I realized is that especially the really big ones, they are starting to go into monitoring very closely and on the indication of their sales cycle, as well as their revenue cycle, whether has it taken longer or whether has it taken any slower. Typically, once they know that their clients are starting to pay faster, it means they can safely say that their industry are slowly picking it up. And I think once that's ready, they should prepare some form of like a bouncing back strategy to go, whether to go on a more aggressive approach and stuff. I think this is the part where businesses actually is very important to look into the trends, especially a trend that relates more of their industry. So I'll go for example. Let's say we talk about logistics, right? So like whether you go discussing about the third-party logistic, mid-mile, last mile, even first mile. I think traditionally a lot of businesses start to realize that a lot of the way that they actually capture sales are always handled very manually. And nowadays the trend is that people are more receptive of buying things online, which means even the businesses, they are already very used to ordering their transport online as well. So when the trend, something like that is already shown to the businesses, a lot of the businesses that we know of already starting to implement more of like even simple as landing page. I think it's more of a very startup oriented, right? But even the really big guys are starting to do something like that already, which I think is really interesting. And the second trend that they can also start to look into is more of not just based on their customers, but really try to understand their customers' customers, because that will actually impact the entire supply chain as well. But I think at the end of the day, like all this is like a very high level strategies that most businesses can look at. But I think ultimately it depends on which industries that these businesses are in and how much resources that these guys have left before they can start to really look into the trend of what their customers are looking for. For me, I feel like personally, I feel like these businesses, they just need to really look deeply into their own fundamental first, whether looking into their operations, whether looking into their customer support. Those are really the fundamental areas that they really need to improve on, and digitalizing that part before they can start looking and follow on the trend or finding something new to innovate. Hope Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Yeah.
Aizat, I think identifying the right strategies according to the current times is one thing, but also what about the hurdles that these businesses could potentially face? You've mentioned about e-commerce, right?
Yeah.
So more and more businesses are going into the e-commerce platform, putting their businesses online.
That's right.
Is there going to be stiff competition now that more businesses are on the same platform, targeting perhaps the same group of consumers? Would that be
Yeah,
one of
very
the, yeah.
Yeah, very good question. Yeah, definitely. The hurdle is going to be there. I think back then, a lot of them, most of the time, most businesses, especially traditional one, they do not really want to go for e-commerce. I think the stats shown very clearly before the pandemic that 95% of like big businesses like Unilever, Nestle, their sales are all offline. 95%, that's huge. And but then now because of the pandemic, it's starting to really pick things up. It's still on the lower end of about 20 to 25%. But with that said, even despite the fact that the competitions are getting tough, again, I think the fundamentals are really, really important. People Sometimes people just forget that the customer centric is the most important aspect. We're Asian, right? We like to be treated nice. The relationship is very important. Even if, let's say, for example, I can buy a cheaper price from Shafinaz, but because I've already been purchasing from you, Nadia, and we have a really good relationship, even if your price is a lot higher, I would still go to you. And it's already been shown case that regardless in any industries, that customer centric is still the core important part. And I think this is the time that a lot of businesses really need to look into that before they even want to compare themselves with other peers or the competition out there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, Ammar, innovation has always been relevant even before the pandemic struck. I think this has been very important in Malaysia. We've been talking about it a lot, how companies should embrace it even more. Now, you've spent a good number of years living and working in Japan. How would you compare Malaysia and Japan in terms of embracing innovation? We know that Japan is a country that is very advanced, very technologically inclined. You've lived and worked there. How would you compare with where Malaysia is at right now?
Yeah, so sticking to the theme of manufacturing. So I used to work for Hitachi. I was there for about a bit over 12 years, and about a quarter of that time I was actually based in Japan, living there. And I managed to be invited to go to the factories quite a lot. One of my jobs is basically to develop new big data or Industry 4.0 solutions for manufacturing. Therefore, one of the key things was to go and visit them. And it was a good eye-opener because you're on the shop floor, you can actually see what's going on, you can actually see how they actually apply innovation to factories. Here's the fundamental difference, I think. They don't put technology for the sake of technology. They actually think about the factory operations and they look at what is the current trend of technology that's available, and then they apply it accordingly. And they think about long term. This is going to help them to maybe handle manpower problems, or this is going to help them with cost control problems or efficiency in terms of time and per product measurement of how long it takes to build an end product. So if I can share some slides, I think this will actually be very useful.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So you've been asking, and I don't have pictures of my own. I cannot share anything from because they don't allow you to actually take pictures. They're very private people.
Yeah.
But I thought I'll share some of the things that they are looking into. So this is actually a video about one of the things Hitachi does. So
Ammar, can you just tell us what they're making? Just out of curiosity, what are the products?
sorry, products?
Yeah. What video that we're looking at?
This one, so Hitachi is actually a conglomerate of a plethora of products. I think this is a snapshot of things we built for automotive manufacturing and also for food industry. So I think what I'll do is I'll go to the part where it's actually really important. Here we go. This is where things get interesting.
Is this this is before pandemic?
This is even during normal times.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
So what I wanted to show is that instead of just looking at the line, what they also do is they look at flow of people. So you can see here, they're actually trying to monitor a person to see what they're doing right and wrong. So that's one of the things that they do, because they're not thinking about machines. They're thinking about overall productivity. So if they can automate everything on the line, what else is there to automate? It's the humans. Another few things that I wanted to show is how to use robots. So this is actually a factory that I used to work in. On the shop floor itself, what they were trying to solve was actually an issue of aging. This is a 50-year-old factory, by the way, and as they update and as they were trying to recruit more people, what they noticed is that the aging population causes them to not be able to replace their workers. So what they had to do was to replace the workers with robots. And this is actually a low-cost solution in their perspective, because they could actually get these kind of dual-arm robots to be placed anywhere along the line to do very specific things and replace humans. So what you also realize is that when you go into the factory, there's not many people. There's actually far fewer people compared to a Malaysian factory. And I'll give you an example of a Malaysian factory because I visited a few. This is an automotive factory, right? And you can see it's very human-centric. It's very paper-based centric. And this is true of a lot of factories in Malaysia until today. For them to adopt new technology is actually quite difficult because, as I found out from these owners, they're running at single-digit margins. It's very razor-thin. So they really have to rely on low-cost labor. This is another one where they were making tudung and telekong. And it's very human heavy. And you can see, it's not easy to actually have distancing. And this was before pandemic, so there was no worry about SOPs, but I assume at this point they were probably wearing masks. So how are they supposed to be able to handle this, right? So the way that the Japanese handle it is more on the culture. They're not thinking about the technology itself. What they're thinking about is they have an aging population. How do I reduce that? And they're going to think about, I have an SOP problem, maybe in the future. How did they solve that? And then they apply technology. So it's a very overarching way of thinking about how to solve a problem and then applying technology. So that's the biggest difference. What I noticed when I came back to Malaysia is that we try to kind of fit technology into the business. Instead of first trying to understand the challenges and then tuning the right technology that can answer the problem. So I think that's the biggest difference that I see between our two countries, and that's why adoption in Japan is higher. And the other big thing that I see is, as a trend is the Japanese government, through their ministries, have always been supportive of doing some sort of program from a top-down approach. So they will actually fund big companies to fund small companies to do the R&D for them, to apply the technology. They will actually have programs where they make sure that the supply chain is all lined up. So there's a more proactive approach to applying policies and technology in the ecosystem, no matter what, including manufacturing. In Malaysia, what I noticed is that we have programs. We have programs, but the programs kind of come with the season. So, change of government, maybe new program, or change of minister, new program. And there's no longevity. Whereas the Japanese ministries, they use the same program throughout. There is no change. So the adherence to a particular program to support the local industry is more resilient. It lasts longer. And there's longevity for even the small companies to do their R&D or do their development without worry of no support or no funding or anything from the ministry.
Ammar, besides these continuous programs and support that is needed for the businesses, would you say other challenges is because is the cost really high for businesses to apply these kind of technologies in their factories, or is it a matter of having the right skill sets of people applying these technologies? Do we lack the right skills?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, this is a long-term issue that we didn't really address earlier. And I think we've come to a point where we become a low-cost country in terms of manufacturing. We want to go value add and go higher, but we have yet to reach that point as a manufacturing industry. Japan has been continuously doing this. That's why they've always been on top. But even today, actually, many people will say Japan's not really the leader anymore. I tend to agree. I think where manufacturing is more advanced is like in many American countries, China definitely, and Japan is maybe in the top 5 if they're lucky. But they're still way more advanced than Malaysia. So I think where Malaysia lacks is, like you said, skill set. I think it's also because of vision, drive. I think policy is one thing that we always seem to not have any strong strength on. Therefore, the businesses without strong policy will try to do whatever they can to keep the lights on. And it doesn't drive growth of talent. It doesn't drive growth for innovation. It just drives growth for revenue. So if we want to think long term, I think unfortunately it's starting with a strong policy, a strong set of leaders to make sure this is a long term strategy that with because you need to build the human capital, right? It takes a long time, and then with that also you can then be more what do you call that, a challenger in the global space with higher value manufacturing technologies or products. So yeah, I agree with you on those points.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Ammar. Very interesting insights. Now, before I move to the next question, just a reminder to our audience members, we will have a Q&A session at the end. You can start keying in your questions or thoughts and ideas in the Q&A box that we have here on Zoom. And now, Ammar was speaking about the support that is needed, the programs. So this brings me to my next question for Shafinaz. Shah, over the years, Cyberjaya has lived up to its proposition of being a living lab, specifically one with cutting-edge infrastructure and facilities, as well as access to an innovative ecosystem and even talent pool. Critical elements that support the development and growth of businesses. And this is also crucial to support the Cyberjaya master plan that we talked about a little bit earlier. So how can these businesses and startups leverage Cyberjaya's living lab to navigate the endemic?
Okay, all right. Currently in Cyberjaya, we are standing out of over 140,000 population. And this population are mixed. It's not just on professional workers or R&D companies or even university students. They are now, we're seeing people, residentials in Cyberjaya. And we are forecasting over by the year of 2035 that we're going to have almost to 500,000 population, if it's not so. And for that, rather than, when the tech companies are inside Cyberjaya, they not just to be in their cocoon of their office space, we're saying that, hey, make use of the Cyberjaya as the real testing environment. Even us here in Cyberview, we're also users of, exploring new technologies as far as solving our problems in doing our business operations. For example, now, because of the pandemic or endemic, people are now working from home, right? But what happened to our office space back in the city? What happens to the city itself? What happened to those buildings that are less occupants currently? But we need to look in terms of the security, in terms of any trespassing, in terms of the safety and all that. So this is where technology innovation will become useful. This is a time for both tech companies as well as the end users or like us to be collaborating and getting to know the problem solutions kind of environment, having to test out first before we make that decision of utilizing of such technology. So with that, this is one example of in terms of making Cyberjaya as the sandbox itself. We understand before you go out into the market, as far as Ammar mentioned that, policy is very important, right, from the beginning. And technologies today are very disruptive. We are always looking at the agility of these solutions, but whether or not the current laws actually permit such technologies can easily be deployed. Not so, particularly for us, when we look at the 3 tech clusters, the current law right now does not easily permit, for example, like a driverless car to be on the public road. easily, or even drone tech players cannot simply fly even to test out their drone tech. There are certain kind of regulations that they have to adhere to. So you need to, for companies like this, they need to be aware. They need to have that information available. So availability of information is also very important. Hence, even for the city planner, or even for city managers, for like us, it's very important to make sure that information also being made available to the public or to the tech companies to be aware of such. So for us, at the end of the day, then is digital infrastructure also becomes a very important component. And with that, we also need to understand, or inputs coming from the businesses and startups, as far as we try to create that conducive environment to make sure that it's ready for companies to be in Cyberjaya, and how they can grow, how they can continue to innovate, and see how else that we can facilitate in terms of, not just in terms of the spaces, in terms of the market opportunities, in terms of talent. When they have more projects, definitely they may want to look at for certain skill sets. And this is where, for us, Cyberview, we get through our connection with the institutions of higher learning, the likes of universities in Cyberjaya that have their own specialization. Should one is looking for fresh hires, or even when looking for researchers, or when you're looking at experienced talent to collaborate or to work on such research activities. So this will be useful for both tech companies, for startups, even for big companies, the multinational companies. Now MNCs are opening up, how even Cyberview, when our engagement with the MNCs, we encourage them to actually to talk to the startups as well. You don't have to innovate. You don't have to come up with your own R&D department, because economies of scale. You can actually work with quite a number of startups out there, even here in Malaysia that we have. Even in Cyberjaya, we have few hundreds of them. If it's not physically they're there, but through our networks of the agencies that are already located in Cyberjaya, the likes of Magic or MDEC or Might or MCMC, that they have their own pool of networks of innovative solutions. So pair up with another ecosystem component. Even for Cyberview, we recently set up our soft landing zone called CoSpace. What it means, this is actually a soft landing space for local companies, or even for foreign companies, to set up their base while they want to start explore first where's the potential, that before they make a further investment at one particular area. I understand that because of the current endemic, virtual presence currently is being looked at. But however, as slowly now, right, we are in Malaysia, the government is relaxing in terms of the SOPs, and we need to prepare of once people start to physically commute, physically coming into the city, physically coming into the buildings, and we need to look at the SOPs and all that to make sure that it's conducive and ready enough to facilitate the real living lab that we're talking about for in Cyberjaya.
Shah, still on the topic of Cyberjaya as a living lab, I think our audience members here are quite lucky, because this is something very new that I want you to also talk about, is the collaboration campus.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what is this collaboration campus, and what are the components that will make up this campus?
Okay, this is something that Cyberview mooted early part of this year, I would say. The collaboration campus, because the 3 technology clusters, we started to look at it in late 2018, 2019 and 2020, when we start to looking at the implementation of it. And then this collaboration campus is designed to initially visualize the development of these technology clusters, because we have an existing compound, an area. Currently, if you're familiar with Cyberjaya, if you know where Cyberview is currently located, there are also the existing organizations like Magic. There's a Futurize. There is a multinational company like Dell. There's also a hotel, Dashbox, and there's a community center called Rekascape. That itself, we want to take advantage of to visualize the 3 technology classes, because there's also existing companies in there, the mix of tech companies and also trading companies and services companies that are somewhat embarking into these three technology clusters, particularly in the smart mobility. I think we have a representation of 3 tech clusters itself, to be corrected. Digital creative, we have a local company called Anymonster. The Monster Studios are known for its Bobo Boy local animation movies that have made mark also internationally. For smart mobility is one of our key success in that campus itself. We want to go beyond than just a testing facility, from the first drone testing zone, and also the first autonomous vehicle testing routes that's now on its first phase. There are 2 other phases that we're going through, which means that there are longer routes on public road that would enable tech companies to actually test out their new their innovation out there. We started with one company, Immovit, which is a good investment, a good foreign local JV company. Now we're looking at a few more local companies, also looking at linking up between the smart mobility with other new technologies like green tech and also renewable energy. What it means is that, because currently, if you look at this collaboration campus, there's also a solar car park. Yeah. From this solar, it can be used in multi-purpose use. It's not just to park your car, but it also can be turned to, if you put an EV charging station there, for example, it can be powered up by the solar panel. And for companies, for tech companies, they can use this actually to innovate. Okay, how can I make sure my autonomous vehicle being powered up green, because it's a clean energy coming from a solar powered, and it's a fast rapid charging. And something that from this, it can be tested out by the people living in Cyberjaya. It's just like how we test out, we're seeing Trike, another micro mobility company, the electric scooter. During the second pandemic last 2 years, they started with electric scooter. Today, they have now looking at electric bike. So we're seeing both electric scooter and electric bike. So they're making use of Cyberjaya, not just from testing, but it's now commercializing it, because they can now charge for people using the electric. At the same time, there's information being retrieved from the usage of these real mobility solutions, the bike and the scooters. So with this data information, you can see how the routes that people are taking in, how many people are using it, where are all these uses coming from. So these data become very important, not just to track that provides the solution. They can also now provide this information to maybe the likes of city planner, the town planner, or even to building owners, right? So it becomes a real business use and also living use. It benefits both businesses as well as the community as well. So this is where where when we look at Collaboration Campus, the advantage that we have started with through this kind of program for our Cyberview Living Lab program. There's a talent, the accelerator, looking at startup. There's a pilot. Pilot is where all the examples that I just mentioned. And enterprise is looking at the capability of companies to further grow and looking into the market access. This is where the commercialization plays an important role. And definitely with these testimonials, we're looking for more companies to be in this Collaboration Campus, because there are this environment that should suit looking at cross collaboration between the 3 technology clusters. Healthcare companies might be able to work with digital creative companies to visualize their solutions in a more attractive way, more graphical way, maybe used in terms of the virtual or augmented reality or extended reality, whatever the new technology terms that people are using now. Similarly, for smart mobility, rather than just looking at transporting, it can be used in the healthcare industry as well. So there are many possibilities of this, and this is where we want to visualize our Collaboration Campus, and we have started this. Yeah.
I think this is the idea of having this campus, is to house all these businesses from different industries and sectors to be able to be in proximity, in close proximity to one another, so that we can encourage them to collaborate, to synergize, even cross collaboration, that is. Thanks, Shah. Certainly something that we look forward to. Now, we have a couple of questions in the Q&A. This is from Brita Harian. I'll read the questions. It's in Malay, but to Al-Zahrin, do allow us to answer in English, but I'll go to the two questions. The first one, I think, is for Aizat and Ammar, and the second question can be taken by Shah. The first one, pendigitalan adalah penting dalam peralihan ekonomi ketika ini, namun masih terdapat banyak SME terutamanya yang tidak dapat mengadaptasi pendigitalan ke dalam perniagaan mereka. Antara yang menjadi isu adalah keuangan, kerana peralihan digital memerlukan pelaburan yang tinggi. Jadi apakah pandangan dan penyelesaian yang perlu? So I think the question is now that SMEs, especially, they have a challenge. It's a challenge for them to adapt in the innovation into their businesses, and one of the bigger challenges could be is that it requires high investments, high costs. So I think we touched already a bit about this earlier, but maybe Ammar or Aizat, I'll go to Aizat if you can elaborate a little bit more.
I don't think that's actually true. I think a lot of businesses have some form of like assumption, thinking that the moment when they want to digitalize, it requires a huge investment, but actually that's not true. A lot of businesses these days, a lot of solutions, technology solutions out there is like really, really cheap. You can go as low as 5 ringgit per month. And if let's say you have a lot of people in your team, it's like some form of like a subscription package. A lot of businesses are starting to provide those kind of solutions simply because that they also understood that SME really need to manage their cash flow better. I think to answer Al-Zahrin, I think most businesses just perlukan untuk tengok diorang punya what kind of solution yang diorang perlukan, and a lot of times the solution kalau diorang Google je boleh dapat harga yang dalam kurang daripada 200-300 ringgit, and I think these days also even the government have already came up with a lot of incentive. Even MDEC, for example, they came up with like some form of grant. Even Cyberview, working together with us, Finnext Capital, we provide a lot of a discounted price for technology solutions using our startups that we have. And a lot of times the cost to digitalize is really cheap. The things that I think it might be expensive is to train their own stuff. So it's not about money anymore. It's more of effort as well as time to actually to do so. And yes, a lot of times it will take about like between 2 weeks if they're really fast, can go as long as 3 to 4 months. But it's an essential move, and the cost to actually do this is to not do this is a lot higher than for you to actually do this. Yeah.
Okay, Ammar, I see that you're nodding. I suppose that you agree with Aizat.
Yeah. So human beings are against change in general, especially businesses. So, I meet a lot of small companies like SME manufacturing. My friends who have small businesses inherited from their parents. And the biggest challenge is actually trying something new. And that's really the biggest issue. It's not about money. It's not about ease. And maybe if there is anything that we can do better is actually helping them, educate them, just to get them over the bump. So, so one of the things I noticed is with the pandemic, with the response of the government, for businesses, there's actually, like as I said, there's a lot of different, support that's being brought out by the private agencies, by the public agencies. I personally am taking some relief through SOCSO, and they have been helpful because I mean that reduces my cost for my salaries for my staff. On top of that, we are very digitalized in terms of our books, in terms of our operations. Almost everything is paperless. So I can definitely say that it's available. For me, I adopt it easier because I'm a very tech-savvy person. But I think for many SMEs, especially the older ones, it's actually the fear of crossing the chasm. And I think what needs to be done maybe is more of helping them, educate them how to adopt these technologies. And then, like as I said, train their people. And once you get the buy-in and they transition, then it's like a drug. They don't want to stop using because they can see immediately the advantage. Right now, it's just getting them over that hump.
Okay, Shah, the next question I would like to ask you. I know that we've heard from Ammar how Japan is embracing innovation. This now the question is asking whether Malaysia is ready for digitalization. There's perhaps a disparity and gaps between urban and rural areas in terms of being able to accept and apply digitalization. So is Malaysia ready?
Definitely. In fact, I think this is the more time is now, because I can vouch for it, because even my own experience way back then, we have we have started, I mean, from the agencies days, or government ministries, even with some private sectors, we started looking this more than 10 years ago. It's just a matter of the right timing and the readiness of it. I think, like what Ammar mentioned, is if we can find ways to help to educate, continuous doing awareness, but more on the ground, being more grounded, or having to able to relate the digitalization adoption, rather than, and it should become to start with from the small scale, rather than showing on the big unnecessary big solutions that immediately people will just taken aback to say, hey, it's going to cost on for me to adopt digital technologies. Whereas there's so many now we got quite a number of local homegrown solutions. Even for us, Cyberview, I can one aspect of it, when we talk about Cyberjaya strategy pillar in terms of smart city, we do share our knowledge and our experience across with other government agencies that also looking in, and they're now talking about smart city across the whole country. And there are different states would have different geographical requirements, different financing requirements, and with some limitations. Not all have the advantage, because most of them largely are in the suburban or even rural areas. So we're talking about readiness, but everyone is excited to want to embark on this already. It's just a matter of how can they do this. To begin with, where can they seek help? Not necessarily something that they don't have to do by themselves from scratch. So talking about readiness, yes, we are. Yeah.
Thank you, Shah. Thank you, Aizat, Ammar, and Shafinaz. This has been an excellent conversation, I believe, on innovation. This is just a start, I think. Although, whether it's a pandemic or endemic, we have to be ready and prepared, and we have to be flexible. Whether we are a business or as an individual, we have to be flexible in being able to adapt through whatever the environment is like at that time. So ladies and gentlemen, that is all the time that we have for today. On behalf of Cyberview, I would like to thank all of our panelists for sharing your valuable thoughts with us. To our audience members, we hope that you've enjoyed today's session and found it insightful. Thank you again to everyone for joining in our discussion. As we anticipate an endemic COVID-19, always remember, the virus is there. It's good to see more and more folks getting vaccinated, but do stay cautious, support the economy, but let's remain vigilant. We will be back soon with other interesting topics as we engage with a variety of other industry players in Malaysia's tech and digital scene. With that, have a great day ahead and stay safe. To all our panelists,